behavioral psychology and how we can use it in after sales. So the obvious ones are things like pricing, but the other stuff I want to talk about is how can it be used in employee relationships? So what kind of tricks can you do in order to make sure your employees are happy in order to be able to get the best results? Also about communication, about customer facing interactions, things like that. That's kind of the areas I want to go into. So we have that first example, the one we talked about the other day, which is about discounting.
Yeah.
And even though, if you start with 1,000 dirhams, you get 50% discount or 700 dirhams. Depending on how you frame that discount has a massive impact on your customer. So if you come in and go, oh, yeah, it's 1,000 dirhams, but I'm going to give you a discount, it's going to be 30% off, then it creates this confrontational and gatekeeping relationship between the service advisor and the customer, because they don't understand why they've given it, but if they can give 30%, why can't they give 40%? And from my own experience, it creates these relationships where you end up with the customers then going like, oh, I want to talk to your supervisor, because if the service advisor can give 30%, the supervisor can give 40%. Then he talks to his manager, and you end up with the manager basically spending all day with the customer, normally getting upset and saying like, oh, it wasn't good, in order to be able to justify the higher discount. And then the customer basically walks away with what he's been talking about, because he's been talking to himself and talking to the manager to be able to justify the discount as the perception he has, which is, it's not good, it took too long and all this.
Also, I feel like there's a more subtle effect that happens, which is the price that you quoted me is not true. It's almost like the first thing that you told me is a lie.
And it has this really negative effect. And the other thing that you'll notice as well is that when you talk to these customers afterwards and you ask them about what they did, they will always quote the price that they got originally quoted, which is why, especially in the Middle East, we have this kind of old kind of way of doing it, which is we start really high and then we can give the discount, right? With this kind of idea that
you're supposed to haggle them down.
But you still have the customers walking away. It doesn't help either side, because you feel like you're being robbed no matter what.
I think some people enjoy the haggle.
The difference you have when you're in after sales is the guy has to buy it, or he has to risk his car, especially things like his brakes. Imagine you go to the doctor and they're going like, okay, we can stop you from dying, but how much money do you have?
If you quote a price and you try to haggle them down.
The thing we've got to bear in mind in automotive after sales is this distress purchase. There is very, very small amount of customers who are coming into a service center because they want to be there. But discounting still is beneficial, because there's a lot of studies that say that I think it's something like 75% of people will wait for discounts before they buy things. So to say that, oh, you shouldn't have a discounting strategy in your business isn't the right choice either. The question is, how do you implement it? And this is where the difference between an earned and an unearned discount comes into place. An unearned discount is basically they're giving it for the reason, it's basically haggling, and you then have to create reasons yourself. You have a gatekeeper who is your service advisor or your salesperson, and you have an earned discount where there's a justification and it's clear rules. Therefore, you have this difference then between your service advisor being the gatekeeper and your service advisor being your helper, right? So if you go into a situation, the service advisor goes like, oh, it's 1,000 dirhams, but I'm just having a look at this now. I can give you 20% off because I can see that you've been coming in at least once a year for the last 5 years. You're classed as one of our lower customers. All of these things then suddenly become things that they are supporting. And you can be really clear on what your discounting strategy is, make it public, and then allow for your service advisor to be the one who helps them get that. It swoops that entire relationship around to make it a much more positive interaction.
There are a couple of things that you're doing when you're discounting. You're giving a discount in order to get a customer. So that's like you're paying for the customer. And in that situation, as a business owner, you would not want to give a discount. It's like your last ditch effort. Versus what you're proposing with your discount strategy public is more like you're rewarding customers. So it's a difference between bribing and rewarding.
And that's the way it should be, more on this idea of a reward. Because this then adds into this kind of gamification you can add in with your customers. So, they say one of the better things you do is this frequent and constant rewards. You can say, the first time you come to us, we're going to give you a free car wash, right? Second time, we'll give you the free car wash, but we'll also give you a 10% discount. The third time you come to us, we give you the car wash, we give you a 10% discount, plus we'll also give you 50% off accessories or something that we want to promote and make it really clear.
I feel like it links back to some of the learning from behavior science and operant conditioning, essentially. So almost always you want to link the reward or the incentive to a behavior that you want to see. So for example, if you want people to enjoy coming to your business, right, or feel good about coming to your business rather than going to your competitors, right, and they can clearly see the incentives linked to coming to you, right, that would encourage them coming more often.
Yep.
Versus just giving a flat out discount out of haggling seems like it will only encourage haggling, which is probably not the behavior that you want to encourage in anyone, really.
Yeah. Plus, you can also utilize it for load balancing, right? You can put in a position that says, if you come 9 peak times, midday on a Tuesday, we'll give you a 30% discount. And that can be based on the fact that your service center is normally empty on midday on a Tuesday. So there was a great promotion that happened with the telephone company Orange in the UK. So they basically did this promotion with a lot of cinemas called Orange Wednesday. So Wednesdays used to be the least popular day for going to the cinemas. So before this promotion, effectively cinemas were completely empty. Then what they did is that if you had an Orange phone, you get a text with a code on it. And that basically gave you a buy one, get one free for any movie. Now, if you see the amount of customers who came on a Wednesday suddenly became one of the most popular days. It became a more of a cultural phenomenon that Wednesday is the day you go to the cinema, right? You still had a lot of customers coming in on the weekends because it was an activity they want to do. But a lot of people did it on the Wednesday, which meant that they changed their entire behavior pattern and the cinemas were more equally full throughout the week.
I think it comes back down to this idea. So if you see discounting as a business, if you see giving discount as an undesirable thing, and I feel like that's the norm, that's the default thing. We're not getting enough customers. We have to slash our prices down, which is basically something that you don't want to do, but you have to do because you're not getting enough customers.
Huh.
So you see it as a bad thing. And on top of that, if you make that public, it's already a bad thing. And now you people know your rules, which means that they will take advantage of you. So the entire mindset around it is backward. Versus if it's these customers have been really good to me, they've been coming regularly, they're loyal to me, and I want to encourage that behavior, I want to reward that. And the way that you give rewards or discounts is, well, I feel like discounts in itself, we should just call them rewards.
Yep.
If you reward loyalty, then you end up building more loyalty. So it feels like a good thing.
Yeah.
But it's more difficult to build a strategy around that because if you don't design your incentives with the correct rules, you might end up burning a lot of cash and not encouraging the right things.
I'd agree, but you have to look at where the starting position a lot of these companies actually are. At least 10 years ago, the majority of companies in the GCC have a average discount of like 50%. They're starting off extremely high. They're giving the discount face forward. And it's primarily because they haven't got the tools and they haven't got the opportunity to change it because they know that they haven't got their pricing right. But what they can't, they know that effectively their service advisors can't get the right price, but they're leaving all of that decision-making, that choice up to the service advisor. And the problem is the service advisor, like any good salesperson, is going for revenue rather than profit, especially because you most likely won't tell the service advisor about the difference between the revenue and the profit because they won't know the cost. And so therefore, when they're sat there and they say, okay, I can make this deal for 100 or I can make this deal for 90, it seems like it's 10 dirhams. But if your cost is actually 85, then that's actually giving away 66% of your profit on that deal, right? So not having control and passing all that control to the service advisor ends up with you just bleeding away that money. And also the perception is the company is very expensive, but you actually are selling it for one of the cheapest, and therefore you're not making any money whilst being perceived as too expensive. Whereas if you can control all this and change the customer's perception, you can actually charge them more and give a better perception of your price.
A lot of value is essentially perceived value, right? If a customer comes in, right, and they feel like they got a bargain, like they paid more, so you got more of the cash, right?
Yep.
And they felt better and felt happier, right? It seems like you basically just created value out of thin air. They gave more money and felt better about it. You got more money and felt better about it. By putting the right incentives in place, you essentially helped both sides.
This is why behavioral science is so important, right? Is because what you actually start moving from this kind of world where it's all based around maths and it's based around Excels and all this, to a world where you actually try and understand the value that you're giving and what the customer actually perceives. And as soon as you move to there, then yes, mathematically it might not make sense. Like the idea that a customer will pay more and feel like they got a better deal does not make sense on any mathematical calculation.
Yeah.
After sales is an interesting field because it is one of the most data-driven fields within automotive. There's so many parts, millions of parts, and so many data points that it collects most people who are data-driven specialists, people who can do a lot of things with numbers. But if you don't bring in that behavioral science bit and you don't bring in that psychology bit, you are doomed to fail, or you're doomed to not necessarily get the best results. You need to have both, which is why I've always loved after sales, because it has a massive amount of data. It has a lot of science involved, so it's not just all about how it feels. It's got a lot of that kind of base data and about it, but it also has that psychology and the emotional intelligence, which allows you to do significantly better. If you can bring both of those things into your business.
After sales sits somewhere between marketing, where it's way more about perception and how a message is received, and manufacturing, which is basically like the cost matters, the numbers matter, the margins are tiny. So which is almost all numbers, right?
Yeah.
The cost is cost plus margin. There isn't that much wiggle room to apply creative strategy here. After sales sits somewhere in the middle.
The crazy thing is that you don't get that type of people in after sales. It's very, very lacking, right? You go to any of the big marketing departments of any of the big companies, especially in the GCC, and you ask them to talk, but actually even at OEM level, and you ask them what their after sales thing is, it's really simplistic, right?
Yeah.
At most, they get a bullet point at the bottom of a new car saying, 3 years service and warranty. That's kind of the level you get. And then you get some nice pictures of a model who's never fixed a car holding a spanner above an engine. That is marketing within after sales. Whereas actually bringing in some more marketing and some of that intelligence that they brought in about how does a car make you feel, and bring that into there would create so much benefit, which at the moment is not there. It's a completely untapped area, which is also insane because it is becoming one of the most profitable areas within automotive.
Yeah.
If you actually think of what you're doing in most cases, most sales within a service location, you are not necessarily selling a physical object. Yes, they go and they do the physical service, but what you're actually selling is a perception of safety and a perception of longevity. Yes, doing a service should keep your car working better, but in reality, if you don't do a service, it's probably going to keep running for quite a long time. If you've got a 2-year-old car and you don't do the service every 10,000 and you do it every 50,000, maybe when it gets to 4 or 5 years old, you're going to have slightly more problems, but it's not something you see straight away. So the actual thing that you're selling is basically like an insurance policy. That's what you're selling, is insurance.
Peace of mind. You want to break down in the middle of the road. You have 100 people coming in, right? You want to try something new.
Yeah.
Most companies are not equipped with a way of dividing those 100 people into groups of 50 and 50, and maybe trying something with one group. Let's say you give them a loyalty-based reward when they come in on the frequency, and to other group, keep them as it is, and then you see what the difference is. To this idea of being able to try different things at the same time,
Yeah.
and see what works. The gaming industry has it down. The tech industry has it down. It's like a normal part of how you build tech products, right? And marketing has it down. Like you do that in marketing all the time. You try different people see different creatives.
Yeah.
The same thing applies to pricing strategy. And I mean, there are some industries who are doing a better job than others, but almost all of them are in big tech, like Uber, Careem. They try different pricings all the time.
Yeah.
But for your service centers, your pricing, like when you want your car fixed, even though you probably have a lot of data points, a lot of customers going through these channels, you're not collecting the data. And even if you're collecting the data, you don't have the right tools
No.
to be able to make sense of it and do these experiments.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that me and you have a fairly regular conversation about it is Excel, right? And one problem that we're facing right now is the fact the amount of data you need to analyze to be able to make the decisions nowadays is more than Excel can handle, right? Excel can handle something like 1.2 million rows of data. Maximum is like 1.2 million, right? But if you start looking and going, actually, I want all the data of everyone who's come into my service centers, a big company is going to have significantly more transactions than 1.2 million, right? And therefore, being able to do that kind of analysis on that and being able to understand actually what's happening is out of the realm of what people can do. And in addition to that, a lot of ERP systems and systems that are being built to run things have designed to, how do I get the action done? It's a manufacturing mindset, which is, okay, I want to be able to sell these parts. And therefore the system is being built and works very nicely to be as efficient as possible in order to sell these parts. Like I put in the part number, I put in this and do it. But the ability to pull out that data, analyze it, is not there, right?
The software that runs most companies is usually a closed system, and they have gold mine of useful data that companies can use to do very, very interesting things, both for themselves, both for everybody can win, except getting that data into any kind of useful format. It's like you export a large file, then you bring it to Excel, and Excel crashes, and you spend 1 week basically doing nothing. Tools shape your thinking. Tools shape the way that you think of things. Like the difference between like using a typewriter and writing things down on pen and paper is massive in the way that you do things. And you're typing things out, so it's very linear. When you're on the paper, you draw things out, arrows going everywhere. The tools that you use shape how you think things. And people almost always will take the easiest path out, right?
Yeah.
So if they have a job to do, and the tool is either going to make it super, super easy to do it, or they're going to find a way around it, which is the easiest way to do it. And then you end up, which most likely, almost always what happens with open orders, is a pain in the ass to close them, right? So they're there, they're not doing any damage. And guess what? You're not actually utilizing the information about those open orders to do anything interesting. So there isn't any incentive to use those.
Yeah.
So you don't have end-to-end tool set. Your toolbox is incomplete, and the tools that you do have are not feature complete. They don't let you do everything that you need. In the easiest way to do things in most tools is not how you want things done in your actual business, right?
Yeah.
So the lack of customization basically means people end up finding ways around it. So basically you're using a hammer, but you have to hold it with mitten gloves because the handle is too uncomfortable.
I mean, that is, you have a hammer and you have a screwdriver, but the screwdriver's upstairs. So you just shove that fucking into the wall. Yeah, what's the old saying? When you only have a hammer, everything's a nail. One of the first analysis I ever did, I was completely confused why we had 30% of all our sales happen in the last 2 working days of the month. And I was like, okay, is there a reason for this? Is this because, and I was thinking, well, people get paid on the 28th. So therefore, and this was on tires. So I was thinking, oh, maybe if you've got like a tire this balding, you wait until the 28th and you then come and you buy a tire, right? But I was like, well, but surely that would still be on the 1st and the 2nd. I could see an uptake after payday, but the fact that it all happened on like the 28th, 29th, 30th, 31st. And then after that, nothing, right? The first was like a normal or less than a normal sale, in fact. So I went and spent a day in a service center, and I asked them, I was like, why do you have so much? And then they pulled open this drawer which had handwritten invoices for everything. And they said, well, when we're busy, it takes us 45 minutes to put the sale onto the system. And I haven't got 45 minutes. If I've got like 5 or 6 customers, or I've got customers lining up, I handwrite it, I put it into the drawer, and then the end of the month, I sit here and I work overtime, and I sit here and I fill it into the computer. And then the secondary thing about that is then the managers, because they're discounting, because again, the way it's all set up is that any kind of discount had to go to the managers, right? So they would give the discount because they know the managers would give the discount. They'd give it to them, they'd sell them. The guys that had the tires on his car, then the last 2 or 3 days of the month, the manager was sat at home just approving discounts until 1 o'clock in the morning every night, just because they were the team was just loading them into the system at that time.
It's just a more usable interface. If you do that, right, then all of that time spent at the end of the month, right, which is 1 week of everybody basically clamoring, wasted time that you're spending from all of your employees is saved, right?
Yep.
In a year, that 12 man weeks multiplied by however many staff you have, let's say 3%, right, has 3 times 12 man weeks that you've saved. That has a number associated with it. So it kind of goes both ways. You need more precision for qualitative analysis. And
the issue though, and I know from experience, is you go in there and you say, okay, I can make all this easy, and it's because the staff are doing it wrong. The first feedback you get is like, well, Tom, fucking do it right. Right?
yeah,
Do it right or we fire them.
I think this idea that you're not working hard enough, right? I think that's the fundamental flaw. It's not that your employees are lazy or they're not working hard enough. They're working really hard. They're doing their job despite how shitty your tools are. It's not that it's your tools that are shitty, not your employees.
Yeah.
And the tendency of business owners to call their team lazy or not hardworking enough comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of how people work.
Yeah. I mean, this is one thing I always prided myself on. One thing I always try to do is, before I'd ever make any sort of decisions, I would go off and do the job. Yeah, I've gone and sat in service centers and I've done it. I've sat in the call center, I've done it. I've done work warehouse and actually been on the warehouse floor and done picking and packing on it, because at the end of the day, I know how I would react in those situations. If I can change the incentives there, right, so I would do better. Yeah, you're always going to have some people who are going to do it right no matter what, because they're great employees. You also have the people who are always going to be lazy no matter what, because it's a bell curve of who they are. But I always go and I always try and do the job, even if it's just for a day, and then decide, how would I do it and how can I make it easier so that I would do it right?
The tool should adapt to the people, not the other way around.